I'll record to my computer. It is recording.
Okay, great. So welcome to the new economy. I'm not even sure what number of meeting this is, but it's May 6th, 2020. I'm not even sure what it's all. But almost been in the pandemic for 2 months now, not quite. A lot of economic implications there, but we haven't sorted it out yet. Shankar, you want? I think we've been just going around and seeing how everybody is and what you want to talk about. My thought is economic implications of the pandemic, which is probably going to be an endless topic, but just something to sort of keep us alert.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, it's wonderful. I already had a start. I just got a call, but I was hearing you guys. Yes, and I think I can give some updates from the VCI group. Ray was also there, and I want to thank Julia because I saw the documentary or the snippet version of it. I liked it, and I really liked how we have explored everywhere. So not just the ocean, forest, and everywhere. All those. So I really liked it, and I look forward to see how the audience or how the reception. And I can't wait for climate healers to share or probably we can do a call or something like that. Like the documentary review, usually climate healers does that. So I'd like to see that way. Because we gather here in New Deal Cafe in Greenbelt. So a lot of people, there is something called Reel and Meal. A good discussion happens, and somebody who is in the documentary or who is an expert in that field of that topic in the documentary usually come and shares, and it's very interesting the room almost goes very calm, like everybody's asking. So I really like that, and it helps to learn and really be part of the change or the mission of advocacy.
Next.
Yeah, I can go follow your agenda, Keith. Yeah.
Okay, what are the economic implications of the pandemic? I'm actually thinking about blogging I have been blogging. I'm not sure who reads my blogs. Oh, Ray does. Okay, great. But I've already been mulling it over, but I think that one of the implications will probably be peak oil. This probably means that's going to be probably maybe not my next blog, but the blog after that. And I'm not original in this. There are other people that are saying, yep, looks like this is it. In 2005, I first started following this issue very closely. I'd been aware of it for years before, but then I became aware that there was a group, the Association for the Study of Peak Oil, which was actively looking at the issue and trying to determine what was going to happen. And at that time, and for some years after that, the consensus opinion was that it would occur sometime between 2005, namely the present. At that time, that was the year it was, and 2015. And some people said, well, it might not quite be. It might be 2020. And then about 4 or 5 years after that, and then for a while it looked like that was going to be it because oil production did sort of decline worldwide. But then it sort of stabilized, and there was a big upsurge of tight oil, the oil from fracking, oil shale, I think it's sometimes called. Anyway, and also, Alberta tar sands, Venezuela, the sort of heavy oil, and suddenly prices of oil got high enough so that it actually made sense to produce that. And so I think that sort of kicked it down the road for another probably another decade. But I think now, I think this is it. I don't think it's possible that we'll hit peak oil, and I think that's. But I think otherwise, I think this is it. It's supply. Basically, supply issues are the concern. More oil you use, the harder it is to get the next barrel of oil, because I mean, everybody's gonna drill for the easy oil first. That's just common sense. In fact that's even let's see. There's a name, I've forgotten I think what the name of it. People call it. But I think Ricardo back in the 19th century, actually, David Ricardo back in the 19th century came up with this idea, which is sort of a common sense application of low hanging fruit. You go for the low hanging fruit first. Why not? So as a result, the more oil we use, the more difficult the next barrel of oil is going to be. And if it wasn't heavily subsidized, I think we'd already be past the peak. I think the reason that we didn't hit the peak around, say, 2010 is for political reasons. It's because people said to themselves, we can't let this happen. We've got to do something about this. And so, Obama came in with quantitative easing, it was called. Basically made it very easy to borrow money. And so then all the oil companies said, okay, we can do that, and started getting involved in fracking, which was the latest and greatest thing. And it's never made money. It's never made money. I mean, there are a few companies that made money, but the industry as a whole has lost money from almost the very beginning. They've become a little more efficient at it, and it was as we were going into 2020, pre-pandemic, a lot of people were saying, there's some oil companies that are in trouble because they're deeply in debt, and their investors are tired of coming up with more money, and so there was already some talk that we might be close to major problems with oil, at least in the United States. So that's just my off the top of my head. That's the case for people. And what this means is the entire economy runs on oil. That's what when oil declines, the economy declines. And I don't think we can switch to renewables or nuclear fast enough. In fact, I'm not sure we can switch to. I mean, as Julia could probably tell us. I'm not sure how well renewables will work at all. I think it's basically unfortunately, economically, it's not a very good idea. I mean, if you've got a choice between oil and renewables, from an economic point of view, it's like, well, oil is very easy to put in your gas tank. And what are you going to have to do to put renewables in your gas tank? Well, you can do it, but you have to have, you have to revamp the auto industry. You got to have electricity. You got to have storage, not only battery storage for the cars, but you got to have, storage for renewables. I mean, because it's very intermittent. So all these problems, and it's not like you can't do it. I mean, sure, you could come up with batteries and whatnot, but every time you come up with a battery or some other method, it's going to cut in to your energy return that you're going to get. It's going to mean instead of spending it on driving or whatever you wanted to do with that electricity, you're going to be spending it on making sure that the system works. So the net energy that you'll get will be less. So that's what I think we're looking at. I think we're looking at decline in the economy, and I think that my basic strategy would be, if I were a political advisor to anyone who wanted to bring about degrowth, would be let it happen. Just let it happen, and instead of trying to save the economy, we should just try to get people so that they can cope with the lower standard of energy the lower level of energy use and materials used and everything else used and land use. I mean, we've got the vegan piece is a big part of it, so that won't be a problem. So that's my basic lecture on the one of the key implications of the pandemic, which I think will be peak oil, if in fact civilization even gets to that point. Because I mean, right now, I mean, the whole political situation. Not sure you've been following this, but I mean, it's just really weird. Just all these people saying this really weird. Some of my Facebook friends that are, vegans are saying like what I would consider to be slightly crazy things about how pandemic is not a problem. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I'm not sure how we can actually get through this crisis without a whole bunch of people dying, just because, and the economy will be in the toilet anyway, no matter what we do. So that's it in a nutshell.
So if we see our oil industry completely implode, what are we going to power our society on? You're saying let it happen. It's, we don't have renewables in place, certainly. So this forces our consumption to go down. But what does that look like? I don't really know were you to let that happen, what our society is going to look like in 6 months, a year, 2 years? How does our consumption reduce?
Well, there's two ways of approaching this. One is, we are invited to advise world leaders on this, and they say, we'll do anything you say. We're okay. And so just tell us, and then we can figure out a plan on that basis. The other problem is, and I think this is something that we've dealt with in the past, if they don't immediately come to climate healers and ask the New Economy Group what they need to do, what are we going to do to convince them? So it's sort of, it's all what we're trying to advise is always going to be sort of a moving target, because we're not going to sure what the next crazy thing is going to be. But I think roughly, I would say I think the United States, at least, there's a lot of stuff that really shouldn't be happening at all, energy-wise. I think it's total inefficiency and this and that and the other. So I think that just going vegan would work for quite a few things. Would keep us going for quite a while. The climate change thing. Well, let's see. What would I do about it? I mean, well, obviously go vegan, okay, and start reforesting the planet. And I think that actually, and this is something that I have not actually researched at all, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but if the Silash, as you know, talks about the sulfate aerosols, that's probably the piece of our economy that we don't want to phase out. If there's anything about fossil fuels that we don't want to phase out, it would be whatever's producing those. And I think it's going to be coal. So we might actually want to keep the coal plants working and get rid of natural gas, because I think the methane that's going into the atmosphere, of course, livestock is part of it, but also just all the fracking is releasing a lot of methane. I mean, they're like burning it, and there's a lot of methane leakage, and there's discussion about this, and we don't really know, but but I would say get rid of the methane, and that means getting rid of the livestock and probably getting rid of natural gas. And then that will probably, and then start reforesting. And there may be an issue with, I think I haven't looked at mangrove. I think know that Julia sent me some links. which I haven't looked at, about mangrove forests and prairies. That prairies might be an opportunity for carbon absorption, carbon sequestration. And I think the prairies might have some promise, but you would have to let it go back to the original ecosystem, which was, you know, a lot of grasses basically that were perennial grasses that had deep roots and stuff like that. And presumably, if you didn't, I mean, if you you could mess it up by just grazing cattle on it. But if you let the grassland sort of evolve naturally, then that's another possible. So all of this has to be, you know, I'd say I don't know, but I'd say let the science decide what we're gonna do. But I mean, that's the broad outlines. You know, go vegan, get rid of methane first thing, start reforestation, and you know, and then maybe slowly get rid of the fossil fuels. And I don't really know what kind of energy is going to replace fossil fuels. I think that probably it will be some form of renewables, but it will not be very much. And we may just have to say, well, you're just going to have to use your electricity when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and maybe reserve because you know, what else? I mean, how are we going to stay alive in the winter? How are we going to get anything done? And as far as industry goes, you know, it's like, again, that because a lot of the heavy was about 25%. Julia might know this. Do you know what? There's a certain kind of like steel production that requires extremely high temperatures.
Yeah.
Can you address that?
Yeah, definitely. It does require high temperatures, and it's just something that can't be done without fossil fuels. Melting the metals, smelting them, getting them in a way that is that you can form things out of them. That can't just like physically not possible to power that with renewables.
So there you have it. I mean, so we're going to have so in the short run, we could just say, okay, we'll reserve our fossil fuels for that. But in the long run, I mean, eventually there's not going to be fossil fuels 500 years from now. So I don't know what we're going to do about that.
Well, in general, we're just consuming a lot less. The price of gas goes up. We still have gas-powered cars. We just, you know, really have to decide, is this trip worth it? Is this time to start tuning up the bike and finding places to go that are nearby? We've got a society that our idea of the workforce is you go to find a job and you decide how far your commute is. That distance is a factor that may have shrunk an awful lot in the last few months compared to what it's been in. It's always grown and grown, especially in urban areas where you have, you know, cities that get really populated, and then you have bedroom communities beyond it. I live on a highway system where people travel 2 hours to get into Toronto and then 2 hours back, which has always been insane. But if the money's right and the what you get for your home investment is better in the outskirts of the city than it is inside the city, which definitely is. If that's what your criteria is for life, then you just live half your life on the road to accommodate that. Those attitudes need something to make them change, and this is going to be one of them. And a lot of has been focusing on the what this has done to the oil industry and all the bridge fuels and all this talk about shale gas and stuff like that. But I haven't really heard about any other. When you just mentioned coal just now, I went, yeah, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to do what Trump said and actually revive the coal industry? Or is it a nod towards nuclear? Nobody's got any idea.
Well, I mean, I could go on and on all night. I would say that, yeah, probably nuclear. Nuclear doesn't look quite as stupid as we once thought it was. Once you start learning about all the problems with renewables. But of course, nuclear fuel is also finite. So it's, and I don't really know, and I'm not sure anyone really knows how much nuclear fuel there is. There's quite a bit that we haven't really gotten into, because the greatest quantity of nuclear fuel we have is actually thorium, not uranium, and so which involves you in a completely different kind of cycle that doesn't involve, that, by the way, does not involve plutonium. So I think that thorium has a future, and there's other things that could be discussed as well. But right now, of course, nobody's talking about nuclear, and the thing is that the environmentalists don't not like nuclear, but the nuclear people don't really want to talk about limits to growth. They see nuclear as a way to save the economy and to provide us for enough energy to go into a glorious future where we will, have all the energy we want.
Probably because it's such a huge investment at the outset. They have to really engage the politicians to say this is something that will make your job easy and grow the economy and make you look good.
Yeah.
It's always been fascinating to me, and I can only really call myself an environmentalist for the last 5 years, but immediately becoming aware of James Hansen, who is so concerned about climate change that he says nuclear is a default option. We have to look at nuclear as our bridge solution, which makes the other half of the environmental movement furious with him, because how can you dare suggest that nuclear is our solution? So,
well, that doesn't even make sense from a climate perspective, because there's so much concrete involved in building a nuclear plant, and concrete is a huge emitter of CO2. It's not even worth it to make them, like from emissions. I can't believe Hansen would advocate for that.
Yeah, that's another example of how the green movement is finding replacements, and this whole language of replacement makes you assume that now we're doing everything with solar power, and that other sources of fuel to bring that about aren't in the picture. That was a big part of the Planet of the Humans documentary, where they were identifying this kind of a shell game, really, that the Big Green is doing, just to say that everything has been changing. And every place the guy went that was hey, we're powered on all 100% renewable, he'd walk backstage, and sure enough, there's a diesel generator there, which is lying too.
Shankar?
Yeah. See, it's like this is where I'm also thinking about the game that you showed, Ray. Like, there is so much R&D is required, because it's more like, or else there is one way to do is like accepting life as building the bricks one by one. But there is other ways, like if you really think, you can get that leap. So I think the hybrid technology came somewhat in that concept, like the hybrid plugins and everything, a little bit leap in the car. And of course, Tesla is the other way. Like, so they're still not fine. I heard those batteries require a lot of chemicals and everything. So still better than the fossil fuel, the amount of carbon that it puts. Like, I was watching one documentary, they showed you why there is a biodiesel thing in Virginia here nearby, and that person is, a lot of truckers even choose to put the biodiesel in their trucks. They told, they were showing the difference how much power you get from the carbon, like compressed, naturally the earth compressed carbon. It's like very dense, and the bang for the bucks is like really better. So probably we have not, or our technology is like so much monstrous consuming, like our appetite. So this is basically like your computer takes all the RAM. So because we run a lot of apps, so nothing is enough for us. Like, so that is what, that's a human aspiration too. And that's why the other concept Keith says, what is that? Degrowth. That's another thing, is like, of course, some conservative societies already, or if you go in a very spiritual way, you naturally become that. Or maybe after some time in your age, in your life, or early part in your age, you're like, I don't need all those. Like, you go very simple, then rather than chasing gadgets, money, or rat race. So I'm just seeing how the things are. But one thing I can tell is, either you have a bike or you have a jet, it's still not enough. That mindset is still not enough. Like, in those days, people can only send things by a physical mail, and their day was still hectic. Today we can send by emails and text and quick. Still our day is hectic. So there is always, we reach a threshold, or especially kind of peer pressure. So I don't know how it's a psychological aspect, but when everybody does, there is a norm created, and you have to keep up to survive. So that puts a full pressure on all the whole system. Like, either they call it as utilize the capacity, but the other side, actually they exploit. It only goes as an exploitation. Like I don't know, maybe that there is a thin thing between a need, consumption, and exploitation. Once you cross a little boundary, you start exploiting. So there is an optimal range for all this, but I don't know. I don't know at this point. We, as a humans, we do really care. Yeah. So I'm not giving up. I'm only saying, like, where is the boundary? Like, am I breaking a boundary at my level, or as a neighborhood, I'm breaking a boundary, or as a corporate, am I breaking the boundary? So that part is still confusing. Like, is it? I'm again looking more from the managing perspective here. So is it something we really need a good technology, or is it something that we have to manage something, or is it a combination of, or where is the boundary?
Our appetite for fuel is obviously a big part of the equation. One of the things that I've been wondering about, and I'm sure Julia's given it much more thought than I have, because I've just kind of begun to think about in this direction, but we kind of talk about our energy and our solutions for the climate, either in the long term, like how are we going to save the climate in general, or how are we going to make changes in our climate and our interaction with the climate in the short term. In other words, paying attention to those tipping points that everybody is becoming painfully aware that this next decade is make it or break it time. So when we see the problems with fuels, and we see the problem with renewable energies, and the industry that has to go into it in order to create it, is a matter of renewables are bad for the short term because they're not going to be the solution that they're built to be, or are they an eventuality that will get there eventually, but it's not the first step. It's not for a few reasons. Obviously, I think our shift is our first step, and reducing our consumption is part of that first step. And just this crisis is causing that pressure down on our consumption. That COVID is demonstrating right now that once we stop consuming so much, once we get a priority straight and decide what is essential, how do we respond? What are all the steps? So I didn't quite form that into a question, but maybe you can comment a bit on that.
Yeah, I think short term, long term, they're terrible across the board. I don't think there's ever a point where they become good for the planet, because just on the basis, like, even if it got infinitely so much better technologically, where the inputs into making it were significantly less destructive, the energy is being used to fuel and power this economy that is destroying life on the planet. So I think just fundamentally, like on a functional level, it's something that is just inherently a cog in this unsustainable system. It's powering empire. And one of the, I mean, obviously it's not getting infinitely better, right? Like, there are just some things that you have to do to make these things, and they have to constantly be replaced. So it's not like all of a sudden you've installed all this solar and wind and it's enough and that's the end of it. It's like they've got a 20, 30, maybe 40-year lifespan on a super optimistic level. But I read an article not too long ago that absolutely horrified me more than anything else. And it was about something called deep sea mining, which is what they're starting to implement to meet the demand for materials for batteries, for the energy storage that they're expecting for both electric cars and storage for energy from things like solar panels, wind, anything that's intermittent. They're kind of banking on this idea of having massive battery banks and storing up the energy so that it can be used when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. And deep sea mining is just a complete ecological disaster in the ocean. It scares me more than any of the issues that I covered in Sea of Life. Maybe not ocean acidification, but I mean, even you think with things like ocean acidification, the deep sea, like the bottom depths of the ocean, are places where life has historically been able to hang on and survive. And even if it's like single-celled organisms living in the bottom of the ocean, you would think that might be a safe place, but they're just gonna rip it up and cause a bunch of sedimentation, and it's absolutely horrifying. It terrifies me. And this is all for the push for renewables, for batteries for electric cars and solar panels and shit like that. But I think it's a complete disaster, and I don't want any part in it.
And usually those conversations are really short. They go, yeah, but what about wind and solar, when the wind stops and or it's nighttime or it's overcast? And they say, well, batteries. We'll figure out the batteries thing. Okay, next topic. Move on. So how do we power my electric toothbrush in the future? If we're at peak oil and the renewables aren't a solution. And you're saying that all renewables, even the ones like hydro that I think all my power through my life growing up in northern Manitoba was all hydropower. It had its own ecological impacts too that I wasn't really aware of at the time. I was kind of tangentially aware of it, but even the wave harnessing powers or storage through more analog means, like drilling deep holes that you force air down and then the air coming back up turns a turbine and then generates electricity. Are there any solutions that aren't horrible? And the ones that aren't horrible probably aren't sufficient. I think it's going to be the punchline.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know how much capacity you can really get with these holes. Yeah, wave energy. I mean, there's problems with anything. Hydro. One of the things I learned that was a complete surprise to me was that dams are often called methane bombs. They produce large amounts of methane. Every time a dam, like basically they create the energy by storing up water behind the dam and then releasing it, and it turns the turbines. So there's a lot of like rising and falling of the water level. So the vegetation that sits on the banks of these rivers will become flooded. It'll decompose underwater in anaerobic conditions and creates a lot of methane. So dams, I believe they create more greenhouse gases per unit of energy than coal plants. So yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it was that much.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that it was ongoing. I assume that it happened when you flood the area and you have areas of forest that are lost to the water, but the going up and down, kind of like we experience it in in the spring right now, allergy season, when you get a lot of mold. Not much, even before plants start to bloom, you have that, especially with this erratic weather that we've been having, that you get a lot of mold because of the changing temperatures, which is, it's decaying. And the problem being this large scale decaying is creating a lot of methane. So my electric toothbrush, I don't have an electric toothbrush, but
You can still brush.
you can't afford to brush your teeth in the
me.
future.
Well, the electric toothbrush doesn't have that. I don't know how yours works, but doesn't it have its own little battery in it that you recharge?
But what do you recharge with? I actually don't have an electric toothbrush. I was just using it as a frivolous example.
Well, it sounds like that would be one thing that you could probably, I mean, just solar power probably would do the trick.
Kinetic energy.
You wouldn't have to have any other storage, but you could have your electric toothbrush. We'd let you have that.
Well, that's another direction to think about, is localized economies. Does that present things that get us away from these huge power grid kind of concepts? And as we reduce our consumption, having our own means of generating electricity, the electricity that we're using, which also would force us to use a lot less. There's still a question of what is the method that you use?
Yeah, actually, that is where I would come back to the Gandhian economics, where how to see is first is the self-sustainability, then always there will be something excess, which you can share it outside world or outside economy out of you. Like you are a simple farmer's market, you will have something surplus beyond the local consumption. Then those things we can actually put it outside. So, but it's also a checks and balance, because what happens is after some time, somebody comes and say like, no, give all the potatoes to me. Then the local people are like, that's the quinoa problem, right? Nobody has, Central America doesn't have a quinoa anymore. Everything is exported. So it's like that's why I've seen a lot of Indian festivals, like they have in village, you'll have a local, at least in a month, one event where you have to spend, it recycles within the same place. A lot of things gets recycled. Like the money movement is there inside, there is a festival, there is some sort of religious festival, there is some sort of a commercial festival, some sort of a harvest festival, goes with the season. All this brings people and creates some sort of exchange. And still some people do it in the barter, like because they have something excess and they just exchange that excess, like, so they are fine. And so once we do that, then you have some excess left. So, but I still don't know, even if you're in Arizona desert, probably you got some cactus jelly or something, you can still go and give it to other people, or I don't know how to see. There is always something scarce, something is excess. If you, wherever we are, like we can start from our home, like we are very good in doing something. So we can just like enterprise that to the outside people. Yeah, still thinking how I can map it to the sustainability? Are we looking as a whole, or are we looking at, again, as transportation or just the food?
Yeah, my thought would be that there's nothing, we don't have to put everything on the local level. I mean, like the Roman Empire, you know, or the Chinese, you know, the dynasties and a long time ago. I mean, they were low energy societies, but they were over a vast physical area. So I don't think there's anything. And you had you know, trade with China along the Silk Road and so forth. So I don't think there's anything. I don't think that we, to a low energy economy, does not have to be that we're going to cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. I don't think. Obviously, we're not going to take trips to you know, the kind of trips we're doing now for vacations, or that some people are taking anyway. But so some things will be scaled back. But I mean, shipping, it's pretty efficient. As if you want to wait long enough for it to get across the ocean. So I mean, I think there's a lot of goods that could be traded. I don't think we have to go to a local economy per se. Doesn't necessarily have to. Isn't necessarily a more efficient, energy efficient at all. If it takes less energy for you to transport it from somewhere else than it does for you to produce it locally, then obviously you should be trying to import it. So if I do a Google search on deep sea mining, is that going to give me the references that I need? Will I get a good introduction to that?
Yeah, you can try and do a Google search for it. I forget the title of the article, but I can look it up and send it to you.
Sure.
After the meeting. I think it's been published in a couple different places. So yeah, I'll definitely be sure to send that to you. It's a really good article. Goes into a lot of detail.
Okay, thanks.
So Julie, in general, would you say that we have to keep plodding along with the systems that we've got in place, the fossil fuels? And are they all on the same scale? Are they different tiers of sanity and madness?
I'm opposed to all of them. Fossil fuels, renewables, just the high energy lifestyle across the board. You know, I think it needs to be dramatically cut back.
So is this the end of electricity?
Maybe. Certainly the end of luxuries would be the place to start, you know. Anything we can live without, we should live without.
I think I used electric toothbrush to avoid panic. Instead, I would say, what do we use to charge our cell phones? Which would, of course, create massive panic.
But I mean, at the same time, when I say that, I don't at all mean like on an individual level. Like obviously, me walking away from this society right now is not going to make a difference unless it's the society as a whole, right? So it's got to be asking the questions of how do we make sure that, you know, everyone across the board is not able to burn and consume at the rate that we're doing. Not just like, I'm going to stop doing all these things and then think it's magically going to happen.
Yeah, actually, the is not wrong or anything. I can tell it from a lot of religious customs. Like there is a community called Jain community, and in their life, like after some age, they start giving up things. Like from today, they'll say, I'm not going to eat potato. From tomorrow, I'm not going to eat pepper. So they start giving up one by one, and they're really convinced like you don't need all those. And then they come to a point but they do it in a very strong mindset, not like I will die, like not in that way. Like you get actually the mental strength by relinquishing something. So they say they do it in that way. And the extreme is, we have seen even sages, they go naked. So that means they say, I don't have a shame, because if I carry that, that is also I'm carrying in my head. So, and then they isolate, almost isolate. And because, and I've seen this in the yogis too, because they said, you're still going to cause a lot of problems by doing something. So they come from that point of view. You can say, I'm doing in a very efficient way, I'm doing in a less harmful way, you're still complicating things. So they are like, they just say that the ultimate is the Buddhist and everything. They isolate the later part of their life, they isolate themselves, and I don't need anything. Like, I'm okay. Like, anything I do is only gonna cause a trouble. I know it's for my pleasure, I'm doing it, or for my passion, I'm doing it, but it's going to mess up somebody's life. and so I can see that point, like how to, but I'm personally not there. So I don't know how to do that. Okay, I've observed people. Like, I went to Himalayas once. I was there, like I was watching yogis, and I went some 200 feet above or somewhere. There was one, it was very cold, 0 degree, like, because in spiritual thing, they say, if your mind is strong, you don't need anything. Only weak minds needs tools, like tools because of the convenience, simplicity, easy doing. So more you depend on tools, more you're going to accumulate things around you. Like, I need an opener. Oh, I need this thing. Oh, I need this. You keep at this, never a thing. But once you put in your mind, I don't need all those. Maybe you don't need all those. You will figure out a way to do things. Like, one shirt you'll be proud to wear, maybe for wash it and wear it for a long time or something. There is a way people do it. Like, but that person I saw, he was like, it was 0 degree, and all he had was just like a towel. And he was there in that cold. He didn't wear anything, all mind control, and he prepared us tea for us. So I was wearing 2 layers, and it was really cold, and it's like winter. But this is the top of the ice caps and everything, and that guy was so cool. And there I understood. I was able to connect the applied spirituality. Like, it's not like something I'm seeing in a movie. The guy is how you can go simple. At the same time, I don't have to go and buy a coat in Burlington or something. So the guy is really making. So there I'm able to relate to the consumption. Like, maybe there is something, like, I could relate that to the vegan food. Like, you really need meat. You don't need to complicate the food system that much. I've seen this in the agriculture. Like, they take it immediately after the harvest, they put it in the sun to dry. Then what they do, they just stack it and they store it. And when the time for cooking, all they do is they pour water, hydrate it. They make a powder, they make it as a grain, and they make food. But the other system we complicated right now is canned. Everything is canned. So I'm always thinking, should I have to go for the dry items, or should I have to go for the canned items? If I'm very convenient and lazy, I'm going to pick the can. But that process is adding a complication in the system of extracting over everything. And I know the can people will say, hey, that's how I make my life. And after some time, we are like, no, I want to be still simple. I'm not going to use the canned products, but I'm going to use the dry products, where I will add a water and I will make it.
Some of the dry products are going to be in plastic instead.
It can be just anything. Yeah, like for example, if I go, you have a lot of the bottle-less containers and everything. They just, for example, you can take a chickpea, or it doesn't need anything to put. You can just go and grab your bottle and you can get it, or a container, your own container. And honestly, that's how I used to buy in India and all. Like, they just have in a big sack or a bag. If you want something, and that guy, you know how he sells? They have I still use my best cleaning thing here is I wait for all those postal newspapers. Free cleaning supplies for me. So instead of going for the Bounty pack, sometimes all I do is I use that paper. I just dry it in the hot tap, or like wet it in the hot tap. Then it gets good. Then I toss it, and I toss. That's one way. I could recycle other way. Yes, but if I use that way, or you can use a cloth. So it works either way. Like like I watched a couple of documentaries, like a simplicity. I'm coming there from different cultures. You can learn how they have simplified the life. So it's one culture is contradicts other culture. I'm not going in that way, but if I absorb within that culture, I can learn something. Then the best practices, which we can take it and we can look. But still, I'm coming back how we can apply from the economy side, how we can apply it at a large scale, how we can apply like I don't know. Sometimes are we just fostering only consumption, or just spoiling the kids in that way? So then we can say like, can we list something from the ocean side, how we can do it? Can we list something from the land side, forest side? So
I don't know, like what?
like for example, I can say we don't need that much fishing.
Right. Yeah,
So
for sure.
we can agree. I mean, I'm saying somewhere we can start. So
Mhm.
because if I'm dependent on fishing, now I need a boat.
Right.
So now I need a boat association, shipping association, everything, and they need it to claim. So that's why I meant complication starts.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and everything. One thing I like, everybody needs a compulsory camping, because
Mhm.
camping you realize you
What?
can camping
Camping.
because you cannot carry a lot in camping when you go for a camping.
Yeah.
So first couple of camping trips, you will be like restless. I want to take this. I want to take this. I want to take this. Like, but then you really realize
Once again, how do I charge my cell phone?
we can find it out. Maybe use our bio energy or body heat or something. We can figure it out. Like we waste a lot of energy. I think that's why I was mentioning we definitely need that R&D. Like that's where we take the leap, innovation, as we have come from the Tesla battery. Definitely is a very efficient one compared to the other ones we have. Like I remember I got a couple of solar charging. One will take a whole day just to charge, and the charge drinks in a matter of few minutes. But now we have even more efficient thing. But you know, now we have this complex hybrid grid. Like you use all non-renewable energy, or we call it renewable. I forgot. Sorry. So like you use either it's a combination of wind and everything. So you don't have to worry about some days if it's a day the sky is clear, you don't have to worry. Then there is a geothermal. Then probably I don't know, is it integrated? That's another problem.
Geothermal, the process is a lot like fracking. So it's basically fracking, except you're not extracting gas from it. So it has the same kind of issues, like in terms of disrupting habitat and creating earthquakes and just kind of messing up the geology in the area. So there's a lot of like local activists in places where they're trying to do fracking who are opposed to it because of the impacts on the natural world.
Okay. So if I do it at my home level, like I've seen somebody doing it home level, especially for the HVAC.
Yeah, smaller scale geothermal is a bit different.
Yeah.
The one that I'm talking about is more they've been trying to power some factories using it, so more of the industrial scale geothermal.
Do they use any other like extraction or something like that involved? Or, honestly, I don't know at the industrial level. So.
Yeah, the extraction would just be for the materials to make the fracking rig, right? So obviously metals and things like that involved, but not on site. It's just the heat that they're using.
Okay, that's like then probably we need like how the people go and do the inspection, like this is your limit. You cannot exceed this.
Right.
So are there some energy solutions that are saying at the like individual household level, like I know that there was a technique of putting coils tubes into a lake in order to extract the heat from the lake in the wintertime and the coolness from to cool down the cottage in the summertime, which is a very non-combustible solution with not an awful lot of moving parts in it, and hopefully doesn't need to be repaired a lot, and hopefully doesn't have a issue when millions of people start doing it.
Yeah,
around the lake.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that one. Haven't researched it.
I've heard in the context of cottages too, which I think I might have just stumbled across the answer. It's something that's fine if you have like 10 houses on a lake, but if you have an entire city and everybody's trying to run their lines through the Great Lakes or whatever, maybe some limits to the scenario.
Passive house. Have you all heard of passive house technology? Okay. I think that would, it sounds to me like that would be a good approach. There are probably some materials issues, but whatever materials it takes to build a passive house, you're only going to incur it once, hopefully, during the life of the house.
Yeah, that's definitely a better idea.
What is a passive house?
It's intended to be a house that does not require any energy to maintain in terms of heat. So you'd have the simplest version would like be south facing, so you get all the sun, and you could shade it in the summertime so it wouldn't get too hot. But the sun would be lower, so it would shine in the windows. That kind of thing, and very heavily insulated all around, and very tight, so there's not any leaks, that kind of thing. And there's a whole. It started apparently in Germany, and there's a whole like little subculture that's trying to promote passive house, which I used to be in contact with, but I haven't talked to anybody in that for some years now. But I would have liked to have built a passive house, but it's going to be expensive. So I just insulated our house as good as well as we could.
I just want to add, like I grew up in like India, where the temperature goes to like definitely 120 or more than like that in the summer. And so, and I've gone to the villages and all, like I've seen houses older than 100 years old. And the architecture is very amazing. Like they will have something like what he says, and they have something called Vastu. So it's kind of like their own tradition way of building, like always. That's why if you can look at all the Hindu temples, it will always face the rising sun. And most of the time the day, and they have enough holes to keep the light inside. So it's already lit in that way. Then they will have in the center, they will have like a fountain. So that water precipitates and or kind of keeps the humidity around that area. And it goes, like I've seen in even hot days, if you go to a village house, it'll be very cool. And then they also keep the plants. They know the plants which you can keep it inside the house, which you can keep outside the house. So they have the medicinal value. They also give a good breeze, fragrance, and everything. So kind of like it has its own study, like but it messes up if you go and put air condition there. Like yeah, but all those houses are. I mean, they won't make you like cold like air condition, but you won't feel it that much hot or anything. Because I remember when I used to work in office and all, there are times I worked in the office, there's no air condition, nothing. The hot air just blows through the windows. And you have to work so sincerely to forget all this. So that shouldn't bother you. I mean, if you are an outdoor project, you don't really care. It's hot, of course, but you are more passionate what you're doing. So you take hydration and precaution. Like so, and what do you call the other one? Feng Shui. There's another one from the East Asian or somewhere. They call dragon. They explain through the dragon. The good dragon should come. There, but basically they are just probably explaining whatever they have found out in their way. Like you have to keep a mirror somewhere, and one thing I heard is you have to always keep a hole because the ventilation. They will always recommend to keep a hole on the top where near the ceiling, so that the hot air doesn't stay inside the room. So it keeps circulates and they also know you have to if you're a senior, you probably stay this part of the area. You stay this part of the area. The noise cancellation, they put something for noise cancellation and everything like so. Like what do you call it? Kind of like a blinds, which takes which they use in studio, like repels the sound or it doesn't make the sound louder or irritating. So we can learn from. And another interesting thing I like is everywhere there will be a temple tanks. It's a tank. Basically, it's like a pyramid built upside down. And what happens is it is connected to the nearby rivers. So, and wherever the water comes, it actually fills up. You have a reservoir for the summer. So whenever the monsoon is there, it fills up. And when the ground is wet, it attracts the vegetation. The vegetation grows. So kind of how they optimized in those days. And we can see here, even in Arizona, like the agriculture is done in the shades of the valleys or the canyons. A lot of plantations and everything have been done. We can learn, I don't know, still a lot, but at our level appetite, those are all looks like giving a puff or a popcorn for a hungry.
Okay. Well, it's let's see, it's 40 minutes after the hour, and I need to be moving along at some point. But this has been a very interesting discussion, and
one thing I wanted to suggest that maybe
keep going.
I wanted to suggest, and it's something we think of for next week, but I'm going to be designing and getting some help from some people, designing a sociocratic tier system, like the broader circles and the narrower circles that relate to them. And New Economy is going to figure high in that hierarchy. It's been suggested to me that our group called, what do I have a hard time remembering the names of groups?
BCI?
It'd be easier if I had it open just a moment. Thriving Systems is a group that there's pretty much no discussion going on in this group. It doesn't have any leadership, but in a sense, it is possibly because it's such a broad category. It's even broader than New Economy, and our economy is a system. So theoretically, it would be a subset of that one. But subsets of New Economy would include the Aquarius currency, certainly compassionate commerce, the food, normalizing vegan food, which maybe should be called the future of food, because normalizing is a short-term shift solution, and what is our future going to be is the future of food. That one certainly affects the economy, but it also relates to a lot of the other groups that have to do with land use, veganic permaculture, rehabilitating land, and I think there's still a gap there somewhere that we haven't really addressed. What does agriculture look like beyond just the veganic permaculture? Because we did talk about food forests and stuff like that in that group. So I'm going to be designing these, and it'll be a work in progress. I'm sure that a lot of people have some input, and we'll see how the base camp is populated. But I just wanted to mention that because it's something that we're discussing right now. And Keith, you have the ability to, if you think that you would prefer to look at the systems, the Thriving Systems Study Group with New Economy as a subset of that, that's one way that we could get that started and just kind of, take a bigger chunk of topic. Unless you like less of a chunk of topic to be able to narrow in on solutions. The broader you get, the solutions tend to be on the smaller circles, but not always.
Yeah. The practical problem that I see is that, like just today, for example, we've thrown out all these different topics, and just one of them, we could devote like 6 months just studying each one of them. And still probably not know everything there was to know. So it's like, I'm still sort of looking, we need a sort of like critical mass of actual information that would enable us to say something positive, like, where are we going to get our energy? Just that is like, you could go on, that would be, could almost be its own group right there, just discussing energy. But and there's a lot of stuff that I don't know about that. So that somehow we have to get a critical mass of energy so that we can actually do something, but a critical mass of knowledge so that we can do something intelligent. Thriving systems, I could look at that as being either a new economy as being a subset of that, because an economy would be a system, therefore a subset of a thriving systems. Or you'd also see the thriving systems could be like renewable energy that was really renewable, or permaculture or something like that. That's sort of like, it's sort of a constituent. It's sort of like for systems, it's like, well, what is a system? A system can either be, and people, what do they talk about? People talk about a system sort of as its own little subject area. They talk about complexity theory, things like that. Julia, do you know what I'm talking about? Or you heard of this? Complexity theory? And so they'll talk about abstractly. It says, how do you know that a system is about to collapse? It's easy to see after it collapses and say, oh, we should have seen the Great Depression all along. But at the time, it wasn't obvious at all. It looked like people were making money hand over fist, and everything was going along swimmingly. So how from within the system do you tell that there's a problem with that? Because you're always, when you're within a system, you're always just operating with what the system can provide you in terms of information. So that's a sort of, it's sort of like, I'm waiting for like, when's there, we've really got a very difficult topic. If you're trying to design the new economy, seriously, this is like humongous. It's like, and we've got it, and everything has to change. It's like from the ground up, everything has to change in order to become even remotely sustainable. So it's sort of a huge topic, and I sort of want to get the overview before I make a particular move and say, okay, the next thing we need to do is write letters to Congress asking for a blah blah blah, or something, or advance the political demand for X.
That describes a task force, and that's probably down the stream. You have the broader systems, thriving systems, broader circle, and then new economy, and then a task force that attacks a particular proactive thing that we can do.
Yeah.
And so study groups, they don't have to come up with the solutions. They just have to come up with the direction you go to accomplish the solutions.
Okay.
I've seen examples where it's.
Here's another example. Population, which Ray, you and I are just talking about right now. And I've forgotten, it's in the vegan world, it says that the main, anyway, it's on some message that's come up about the planet of the humans, which I have not seen still. But I'm reading what everybody says about it, but I'm not sure I want to see it myself and spoil the fun. But population. I mean, you could say, well, with a vegan world, we should be able to feed, 10 billion people or 15 billion people. And, in theory, that makes sense because all this land is being freed up. And, it would approximately double the amount of food that we would have. We'd just be feeding it for people, they're not to humans. But when you get into it, that it's more complicated than that, because long term, how are you going to maintain the soil? And how are you going to maintain this? And this is based on an industrialized agriculture, which requires fossil fuels and, and metals and all this other kind of stuff. So are we going back to the 19th century sort of agriculture? We could probably sustain about 1 or 2 billion people, 1 or 2 billion vegans on 19th century agriculture. In fact, just at the beginning of the 20th century, there was this big panic among people who were interested in agriculture because they said, we're running out of fertilizer. And without fertilizer, the soils are going to deplete and everybody's going to starve. And then they came along with artificial
Haber-Bosch.
Yeah, Haber-Bosch. So are we really going back to the 19th century, or we just, and what kind of population can we sustain with that kind of thing? And can we put this on the back burner? Can we say, okay, well, right now we're just going to worry about climate change because that's the only problem we can really address. Or that's another way of sort of segmenting and pushing some problems off down the road. But we still need some sort of overall roadmap. What needs to be tackled first? I would say the first question would be limits to growth. I mean, that's just sort of my take. As sort of a broad perspective is saying, what is the scale that we're going to have of the economy? How many people we're going to have? What kind of energy are we going to use? What kind of materials? What kind of social structure? Just sort of those broad kinds of things. It's a huge, even putting it in those terms, it's a huge topic. So, I mean, I could just tell you what I think, but nobody would like that. Well, somebody might like it, but Ray might like it, but no one else would.
I didn't know what it is now.
Yeah, it's limits to growth. I mean, we have to reduce consumption, we have to reduce population, we have to eliminate livestock agriculture. The easiest thing is to eliminate. That's the easy part.
Yeah,
now,
it's an easy sell in this base camp.
No, it's not just
agriculture. Next, that's our baseline.
Yeah. But
Monday 9 a.m. we had that solved.
The thing is, it's not technically complicated. It's not like we need some fancy gadget to produce tofu burgers with or anything like that. It doesn't require any fundamentally new technology. It actually requires less technology, and it makes everybody healthier. So it takes a whole huge burden off the economy. So it's like that's sort of the first thing we need to do, and it's probably easiest for society, not just easiest for us to agree on, but also it's probably easiest for society to agree on. So that's sort of
the transformation is coming now. A lot of people are going to eat all these plant-based burgers and everything. They're going to get healed. They're going to see, I never knew. I know I'm not having all those problems I had 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So they're going to slowly move to the plant-based food. So it's going to show the change. So
in the 1970s, there was a meat boycott because in 1973, I think, because the price of meat went up, and so people said, "We're outraged. We want So we're going to boycott meat for a week. And some people took that, boycotted meat for a week, and wound up going vegetarian. So I think that this is actually a good opportunity, and we didn't even have to do any big campaigns about it. But you know, it looks like a lot of the slaughterhouses, even if Trump goes through and forces everybody to go back to the slaughterhouse, it's still going to be, there's going to be a big drop in meat consumption, I think, which is a sort of a golden opportunity for us.
Now they're saying all those meat eaters are coming for the vegan burgers.
I was looking for an opportunity to bring this into the economic discussion, but I just got an article from the Harvard Political Review, a paper titled, "Rather than cull millions of livestock, let's end animal agriculture." Yay, Harvard. And I can work it into the economy because the economy is in the first sentence. As the U.S. economy reels from the COVID-19 pandemic, the country's meat producers are facing a logistical disaster. And it's followed by no good news for meat. And, you know, somebody just taking a look at an industry realistically and saying, you know, it's done. Whether it's we support it now or not, and usually things get worse before they get better. You try to save it because everybody likes it, but then everybody has to, you know, decide sooner or later, is it something that we like or is it something that we need? And the more we pay attention to things like slaughterhouses, the less we tend to like them. They poll, should we end slaughterhouses? It always ends up in like the 60%. So go vegan. Oh, no, let's not be hasty. What do you think slaughterhouses are? They're for you. Unless you stop buying the product from them. The more people think about things, the more they start making connections.
Yeah.
And it's been a time where we've been sent to our room by the COVID virus, and we have to think about things.
It kills every side. That's the saddest part is you could be a truck driver or it could be anything around the meat. The death is promised. So it's becoming a suicide weapon. Like, so that's not a nice thing. Like, yeah. You eat, you're gonna die in months. You're gonna support making that food. You're getting the contamination. It's like just keep distancing, meat distancing. See, one more point I want to add. I forgot. We have this one more group called, which I think there is a plan to transition. Right? What do you call that one?
Which one?
Beyond animal or something. There is a group.
The platform Beyond Animal, yeah.
Yes, beyond, just especially for the economy side, because there are a lot of products, services, and entrepreneurs, everybody listed there. So that is probably, we might use that as one of our interactive tool, more from comments and everything, groups, we may transition, yeah. And I want to ask one more question to Julia, like, see, this is, or maybe to all of us, like, we can study, then Silesh told in previous meeting, the goal of the study group is to form a task force, which eventually brings the Vegan World 2026 mission or that objective. But how can we, if something could be a radical thought among us, it will evolve by itself, no question. But there are programs going around in other agencies and everything. Like, for example, Julia, do you have any proposal? Like, do you want to suggest anything? And you don't have to worry about the economy because it could be economy, but it will involve other groups. That's why the VCA is there. But it can originate here. And you could have a deadline. Like I had a deadline, I went and did. But for you, if it's like, hey, if we all do this, it impacts the economy. At the same time, it also creates the mission. So do you have something like that you want to propose? Come up with something we can discuss. Like.
Okay, I'll think about that.
Thank you. Yeah, open to everyone, but I just picked you so that as a new member or something, like we were been talking past few weeks, and the goal is it can create a change both inside, as you're educating us, bringing the topic, or or making the topic better, then we are going and creating some impact outside.
I was going to ask, what's the punchline of your documentary? What is the takeaway? If you're shy to say it, we could stop the recording.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Stop the recording. Okay, pausing. There we go. Recording back on. If you wanted to know what happened, we all know now. The four of us know, and you didn't show up for the meeting. You're watching the recording. Show up for the meeting next time, and you get to learn stuff.
Yep. Yeah, if they've watched this recording far enough to get to that point. Okay, so yeah, this is great. Let's talk again next week, same time, same station. Like, where does the group go? What do we want to talk about? Think about that. Making a concrete proposal sounds like a great idea. Something we could discuss. And if we can all come up with something like that, then we can move forward from there to more and greater things. So I'm going to leave the meeting. And do you want to, if you all want to leave the meeting, then if you don't want to hang around, I'll leave it up. Otherwise, I'll just end the meeting totally. So what do you think?
We got any more business to discuss on the recording or not?
Yeah, I have to go to another call. I have to probably call. So,
Okay, so we're meeting again same time next week?
Yeah, 6:30 next Wednesday.
Okay, we'll have more to report, I'm sure.
Oh, wait a minute. Next Wednesday,
Oh, yeah. You're not
gonna be
able to attend.
I have another vegan group that I had in a Zoom meeting that was previously scheduled that I forgot about. So I actually.
Which one is it? Just in case it's something that I am going to find out about.
No, it's Denver Vegans. It's
Oh, not in our group. Oh, I see.
the local group.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I'm the host, so I can't get out of it.
No, it sounds important.
Canceling the whole thing. So I've got to miss it. So enjoy yourselves. Take over the world. And let me know about it.
So I said I would take over for next week.
What?
I'll take over hosting for next week.
Sure, whatever you all want to do. Okay, so I will see you 2 weeks from now, and everybody else can see each other next week. But I look forward to hearing what happens.
Yep, we'll record whatever happens.
Talk to y'all later.
and please expect some offlines to catch up the mystery.
Something, yes. Okay, so go on.